So yeah, it'd be easy to think, oh, well, she's, postpartum, maybe is a thing after she's had her fourth kid. But having a mental illness is not clinical insanity, and it's not an excuse for this kind of behavior. It takes away personal responsibility from the person who seems to have done the harm in this situation. The unfortunate truth of the matter is that sometimes the person in question is just kind of a cunt. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Court of Random Opinion. My name is Neidigh. If you've been following my channel, you know I'm a psychiatric evaluator. I'm not a psychiatrist, this is not medical advice, and I'm not a therapist. I cannot fix your relationship with your mother. What I do is specialize in acute psychiatric crisis. So here in Florida, when people are brought to the emergency room under the Baker Act, which is the equivalent of a 5150 in California, if you guys know what that means, I do the initial psychiatric evaluation and work with the physicians in the emergency room to determine whether or not somebody needs to be involuntarily admitted to the psychiatric ward, or if they can be safely discharged to a lower level of care with a safety plan in place. I make my recommendations to the doctors, a licensed physician has to sign off on it, and then the patients go on their way, whether that's to their house or to the Grippy Sock prison. The things that I'm about to tell you are obviously reflective of my personal views and not those of my employer. And if you are my employer, please stop watching this. I'm going to use some language. Now, I've been covering the Justin Baldoni versus Blake Lively legal saga. However, most of what I've done so far has been pertaining to court documents and updates. Today I want to start talking about something a little different. Today I saw a clip from my friend Dave Neal's podcast. If you're not following Dave Neal on the Rush Hour podcast, you're missing out. But in that clip, comedian Whitney Cummings is basically saying that Blake Lively should just plead insanity and dip out. I'm going to show you that clip, and then we're going to talk about why that's A, not realistic, and B, kind of dismissive of any personal responsibility that she should be taking in this situation, assuming that what people believe about her and her manipulation of this situation is true.
Am I the only person who's starting to feel kind of bad for Blake Lively?
Yes.
It's now it's starting to be brutal.
You got to kind of say, all right, but do we feel bad for Justin Baldoni? One of them is going to be a billionaire after this is all said and done, and the other might never work again.
If I'm their lawyer at this point, I'm just going full insanity defense. I had postpartum depression. I mean, I did fully go insane. I mean, I was doing some wildly insane things, mostly with food combinations, but I don't know.
Far cry from false sexual harassment claims, by the way. Food combos. I mean, one is a lot more hurtful than the other.
If I had 4 kids, after I had 1 kid, I felt violated and harassed by everyone. People would text me and they'd be like, "Can I come see the baby?" And I'd be like, "If you come to my house, I will call the police." Even if I respond saying, "Sure, love to," I will call the authorities if you show up. All right. My house is covered in diapers. I
mean, I don't have diapers, but I will call the police if you show up at my house because I simply am not that social.
When I had postpartum depression, everything felt like a violation. I would be walking around Trader Joe's and someone would be like, "How are you?" And I'd be like, "Excuse me?"
Okay, I think that's enough of that. This is actually the second time I've shown Whitney on my channel recently. She had some interesting takes regarding like some lesbian conspiracy with the LA fires. She's actually grown on me. I still think she's wrong here, but that's not malicious. Here's the thing. I feel like most people are not going to be the type of person to falsely accuse someone of sexual harassment or some sort of smear campaign. And so people who don't understand that kind of irrational or terrible behavior, our brains are searching for a way to understand it. So yeah, it'd be easy to think, oh, well, she's, postpartum, maybe is a thing after she's had her fourth kid, maybe she's like has a legit mental illness. But having a mental illness is not clinical insanity, and it's not an excuse for this kind of behavior. My problem, not with Whitney, but with this sort of take, is that it takes away personal responsibility from the person who seems to have done the harm in this situation. We search for more complex answers that kind of take the evil out of the situation. But the truth of the matter is, in some situations, the person in question is unfortunately just kind of a raging cunt. An insanity plea is not something you can just snap your fingers and have things work out. Being mentally ill doesn't mean you're insane. Not clinically, I might say, oh, that behavior's insane, or what that person just said is insane, but I don't mean that literally. So to take an insanity defense, Blake Lively would have to prove that she did not understand what she was doing, or she did not mean to do what she was doing. She would have to be so mentally unwell that she could not take responsibility for her actions. Now, given the fact that she was able to do her job properly and go through the process of completing the film, she seems to have had the capacity to control herself. While she may have been suffering from some postpartum issues, it does not appear that her issues were so severe that she was handicapped by them. Certainly not now, because this lawsuit was filed recently. These accusations weren't just made years ago, they were brought to the general public within the last few months or so. From what we know, I'm not seeing any objective signs or symptoms of psychosis. I'm not seeing any evidence of delusion. You can be depressed or anxious or manic, and the things you do, you still have to take responsibility for them, unless you are so sick that you are literally incapable. And in this particular situation, that would mean Ryan Reynolds is also suffering from the psychosis, because he's participating in this. And if something were that off, if she were so insane, you would think her husband would notice and also say, hey, maybe we shouldn't enter into this lawsuit that could end up costing us millions, hundreds of millions. You would think her publicist would realize, hey, something's off here, something's not adding up. Now, I can only speak on what we the public have seen. I believe there's some paranoia there, especially pertaining to the secret smear campaign, untraceable smear campaign. But being paranoid is not the same as being insane. At this point, there's just no objective reason to believe that Blake Lively was ever insane. You can suffer from postpartum issues and still take care of yourself, go to the doctor, go about your day-to-day life, take care of your kids, do your job. Some people have it worse than others, and some people can't take care of themselves, and they go through postpartum psychosis to the point where they cannot help what they're doing. I mean, I'm sure some of you have heard the horror stories about mothers who, go through a psychotic episode postpartum and kill their babies. That's not what we're looking at here. So to me, I find the idea that she should take an insanity plea, number one, irrational, and second, I think it could be kind of offensive to people who have actually suffered from such deep postpartum issues that they could not control their actions, and it uprooted their entire life, possibly destroyed their family. In my opinion, this is just not what we're looking at here. Now, that's definitely not to say that Whitney or anyone who's, saying she should plead insanity, that doesn't mean they're a bad person or I think that they're terrible or anything like that. I definitely don't think that, okay? I just think that sometimes as a layperson, people don't really understand kind of the gravity of what they're saying or the high burden to meet the threshold of pleading insanity or what's truly insane. I've struggled on and off with depression and anxiety throughout my life. I'm not going to go and make heinous accusations against someone who did nothing wrong. And also, even if someone makes you uncomfortable, that isn't a crime unless they actually did sexually harass you. The reason I got into YouTube in the first place was actually relating to a similar situation with the same principle. A woman falsely accused The Bachelor of impregnating her with twins, and people were saying she needs to go to the mental hospital, she's, insane, delusional, and I'm thinking no, because people who are delusional, psychotic, insane, they're not that calculated. They don't plan things steps ahead, they're not that organized, they're not diabolical, they're sick. I didn't see a critically ill person there, because that woman was going to great lengths to cover up her actions and the things she knew she had done wrong. And to some extent, I think the same applies here, where I don't think Blake Lively is a critically mentally ill person to the point where she should be pleading insanity. I think if the allegations against her are true, and they might not be, they haven't gone to court yet, of course I could be wrong, but if she really has enacted the kind of manipulation and false accusations that the public at large seems to believe that she has at this point, then Blake Lively doesn't need a padded room. She needs to take responsibility for her actions. Now, whether or not that actually ends up being the case when everything comes out in court at the end of the day is yet to be seen. But for now, I think suggesting insanity is a cop-out and removes personal responsibility from someone who really needs to take responsibility for their alleged actions. Alright guys, that's all for now. I'll be back later on to discuss some of the psychiatric or behavioral kind of aspect of things, but right now I gotta get back to work. We are almost to 10k subscribers, so please don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button. And if you don't like what I have to say, that's fine. Just please disagree respectfully. All opinions are welcome here as long as you're not being a cunt. Thanks everybody. I'll see you all soon.